It was supposed to be a grand moment. The royal portrait reveal was an occasion meant to celebrate Queen Camilla's legacy. After years of dedication, loyalty, and the quiet strength she had brought to the monarchy, this was her moment to stand in the spotlight. The press were eager. The royal aides dutifully scurried about, ensuring everything was perfect. Buckingham Palace was brimming with anticipation. Members of the royal family, the aides, and the elite were all gathered in the grand hall. They'd all seen portraits before, but this one, it was different. This portrait was to be the tribute, the lasting image of Queen Camilla. It was to immortalize her reign. As the curtains slowly drew back, a hush fell over the room. Camilla stood there, poised and composed, her regal smile fixed. The room was silent, waiting for the first gasps of admiration. But instead, an unexpected reaction rippled through the crowd. A wave of hushed whispers spread, almost imperceptible at first, but growing louder by the second. The portrait wasn't what anyone expected. The likeness of Camilla was there, but not the queen they had hoped to see. The artist had captured her in an awkward moment, eyes not quite as proud, her smile oddly forced. The grace and majesty one would expect from such an occasion were conspicuously absent. Instead of a regal figure, the portrait depicted her as distant, almost uncertain. The crowd's reaction was immediate. An uncomfortable shift of feet, averted eyes, and silent gasps. In the shadows, members of the royal family exchanged wary glances. Princess Anne, who had long been skeptical of Camilla's place in the monarchy, wore a thinly veiled expression of disbelief. The subtle tension in the room was palpable, and the small murmur of gossip quickly turned into sharp whispers. There were no words spoken directly, only the quick, darting glances of those who knew the stakes. The portrait, meant to celebrate her, had done something far more dangerous. It exposed cracks in the carefully constructed facade of the royal family. But it wasn't just the portrait. It was the silent confrontation that followed. Princess Catherine, who had always been poised, was no longer looking at Camilla with admiration. Instead, she stood back, distant, her arms folded as though defending her own space from the oppressive weight of the room. Camilla noticed how she could not, but she said nothing. Her smile faltered slightly, though no one would say it out loud. The portrait's failure to reflect her grandeur had become something far worse. It had become a symbol of how fragile her position really was. The tension between her and the other royals was no longer hidden beneath pleasantries. It had slipped out into the open, only a momentary glance away from chaos. Her legacy, her long, quiet battle to stand by, Charles had, in this one brushstroke, been put into question. The whispers were no longer about the art. They were about her reign. The room grew tense, and whispers spread like wildfire. But no one could have predicted what would happen next. Was it an accident? Or was it a calculated move by someone close to Camilla? A betrayal during the most important event of her reign, this was the moment that would haunt her for years to come. As the royal family tried to absorb the shock of the portrait reveal, the true depths of the division began to show. It wasn't just the public's reaction to the portrait. Something darker was unfolding behind the gilded doors of Buckingham Palace. The sharp tension in the room grew unbearable when Princess Anne, standing just feet away from Camilla, deliberately avoided her gaze. The silence between them spoke volumes. As Anne stood stiffly, her eyes focused anywhere but on her stepmother. It was clear that a long-standing resentment had finally broken through the surface. Camilla could feel the coldness of Anne's presence, a sharp contrast to the usual carefully managed public interactions. The years of quiet animosity were no longer hidden behind polite smiles and formalities. They were now a glaring, undeniable reality. But the real bombshell came when a royal aide, unable to bear the weight of the secret any longer, leaked confidential details to the press. Whispers of a growing rift between Camilla and the rest of the royal family reached the public. The scandal wasn't just about the portrait, it was about something much deeper. The aide revealed that the royal family had been privately questioning Camilla's role for months, especially her relationship with her stepsons, particularly Prince William. Those closest to her now doubted her ability to maintain the monarchy's image, casting a shadow over her very legitimacy. A private confrontation between Camilla and William, just days before the portrait, revealed the cracks in their relationship. It was a clash that no one had expected. With his back turned, William had spoken coldly, criticizing her approach to the crown and warning her that the public's perception could no longer be controlled. Camilla, ever the diplomat, tried to keep her composure, But the tension between them was undeniable. She had always fought to prove her worthiness, but now even her stepson, whom she had been close to for years, was questioning her place. As the portrait reveal continued to spiral into a fiasco, rumors spread like wildfire. Some began to suggest that the artist had been subtly instructed, or perhaps had taken it upon themselves to create a portrait that would cast Camilla in an unflattering light. It was no longer just a matter of a mistaken brushstroke or artistic interpretation. The whispers grew louder. Could this be an act of sabotage? A message from within the family itself, telling the world that Camilla was no longer seen as the queen she had once hoped to be? The speculation was impossible to ignore. In the days that followed, the public's reaction to the portrait ignited a firestorm. Social media exploded with criticism. It wasn't just the awkwardness of her pose or the less than regal expression. It was the way it made Camilla seem almost unworthy of her title. The media described her smile as uncomfortably close to a sneer, and soon, that description became the viral image of the royal event. The cruel commentary spread like wildfire, turning the unveiling into one of the most humiliating moments of Camilla's life. The portrait had not only failed to honor her, it had exposed her vulnerabilities for the world to see. The whispers of betrayal echoed through the palace halls, but it was clear this was only the beginning. With the betrayal in full swing, the palace was about to erupt with secrets and revelations that no one was ready for. Who painted the portrait, and why did they choose to portray Camilla in such an unflattering light? The answer could shatter everything. It was a question that no one could ignore as the scandal surrounding the portrait grew. Camilla's world had already begun to unravel, but the true depth of her humiliation lay in the hands of the artist, a figure whose background had been carefully obscured until now. What had seemed like an innocent artistic endeavor was now revealed to be anything but. A deeper investigation into the artist's past uncovered a troubling history with the royal family, one that stretched back decades. Far from being a neutral observer, this artist had long been at odds with the monarchy, particularly Camilla. Rumors surfaced that the artist had once been publicly vocal about their disdain for the queen's role within the royal structure. Their disdain wasn't a passing remark. It was a deeply ingrained opinion that had festered over years. The artist's close ties with a royal family member known to have criticized Camilla only added fuel to the fire. The whispers around the palace grew louder. Was this portrait more than a simple depiction of Camilla's reign? Could it be a calculated act of rebellion? A silent message from within the royal ranks, aimed directly at the queen? Interviews with those who had worked with the artist painted a picture of a person who, while skilled with a paintbrush, harbored a personal vendetta. These sources, speaking on the condition of anonymity, hinted that the artist had long resented Camilla's rise to power, feeling that her presence in the royal family undermined the monarchy's history and legacy. Some even claimed that this particular portrait had been designed to make a statement, an act of defiance disguised as art. The choice of pose, the subtle distortion of her features, and the deliberate lack of regal grandeur seemed to align with these suspicions. This wasn't just a portrait, it was a statement, and Camilla was the target. The more the investigation peeled back the layers, the more it became clear. This portrait wasn't an innocent blunder, it was a political weapon, painted in broad strokes of rebellion. Once, the unveiling had been anticipated as a grand celebration of Camilla's reign, a chance to immortalize her as queen in the eyes of the world. Now, that same moment was marked by suspicion, betrayal, and deep-rooted questions about her future in the monarchy. Could she ever recover from this? The portrait, which was meant to bolster her image, had instead become a symbol of her weakness, her inability to control the narrative around her. But the real twist came when a royal aide, desperate to clear their conscience, leaked confidential information about the artist's connections to those within the royal family who opposed Camilla. The aide, once a trusted member of the palace staff, had grown disillusioned with the monarchy's inner workings and now feared the consequences of revealing too much. They had seen enough to know that the portrait's creation wasn't a simple artistic endeavor. It was part of a larger, more dangerous scheme. And now, with the leak exposed, the aide had gone into hiding, fearing royal retaliation. But it wasn't just the artist's past that was causing a stir. It was the shocking secrets Camilla was about to uncover. As the reality of the situation dawned on her, Queen Camilla's world began to collapse. The unveiling of the portrait, a moment that should have been her triumph, had instead become her most humiliating defeat. The cameras captured it all, her forced smile faltering, the brief flicker of panic in her eyes, and the quiver in her voice as she tried to maintain composure. But the world saw something different. They saw vulnerability, not royalty. The emotional toll was evident, even as she struggled to hide her distress. The queen, once an image of poise and grace, was now exposed, her pride and her reign hanging by a thread. And then came the storm. Social media erupted in a frenzy of criticism. What was meant to be a symbol of her reign had quickly become a symbol of failure. Memes mocking her expression flooded the internet, and headlines twisted the event into a scandal of royal proportions. Behind the palace walls, murmurs of dissent grew louder. Memos were quietly sent, indicating concerns about the monarchy's stability, and whispers of a possible leadership crisis began to circulate. Royal aides, who had once been loyal to Camilla, started to question whether she had the strength to lead. If this portrait, the very thing that was supposed to define her place in history, could fail so spectacularly, what did it mean for her future? The portrait quickly transformed into a symbol of something darker. It wasn't just a poor artistic decision. It was the embodiment of her inability to unite the monarchy. Camilla's own supporters, those who had once stood by her side, began to waver. The cracks were beginning to show. For some, the portrait revealed more than an awkward pose. It showed a queen struggling to find her place, unable to secure the respect of the family or the people. The royal image, once carefully crafted over the years, seemed to be crumbling in a single public moment. Behind the scenes, the pressure only mounted. A secretly recorded phone conversation surfaced, revealing the true extent of the discontent within the royal ranks. Key figures, once loyal to Camilla, were now openly questioning her leadership. One royal aide, speaking under the veil of anonymity, expressed doubts that Camilla was fit to guide the family through its current challenges. The betrayal stung even more, knowing that those closest to her were now second-guessing her ability to hold the throne. The press, like vultures circling a wounded animal, pounced. Newspapers from across the globe were quick to frame Camilla as out of touch, a queen who had lost touch with her people and her family. Her leadership was now seen as weak, and the headlines that followed reflected her downfall. What was meant to be her crowning achievement had turned into a public spectacle of failure. The story that had begun as a royal celebration was now one of scandal and shame, fueling the flames of public opinion. As the scrutiny reached a fever pitch, Camilla found herself facing the most difficult decision of her reign. Could she continue to serve as queen, or was her time coming to an end? Her family, the public, and even her most trusted advisors seemed to be turning against her. The mounting pressure was suffocating. How long could she remain in power if she no longer commanded the support of the very people she was meant to lead? The future of the monarchy and her place within it was now uncertain. But the portrait wasn't just a personal defeat. It was a signal of a much deeper and more dangerous shift in the royal family. Was this the final straw? Prince William, the future king, takes a stand quietly but resolutely. What does it mean for Camilla's reign? As the unveiling ceremony reached its painful conclusion, the eyes of the world turned to Prince William. But his reaction was chillingly silent. He stood there, his face unreadable, offering no support, no acknowledgement. His cold silence spoke louder than any words could have. The tension in the room was unbearable. Camilla, usually a picture of poise, could feel the weight of his withdrawal. His absence of solidarity was the unspoken rejection of her place at the center of the monarchy. It was a moment that would forever change the royal family, marking the deepening rift between Camilla and her stepson, who had once been her most loyal ally. Behind closed doors, the situation escalated. A private confrontation between Prince William and King Charles revealed the simmering discontent that had been brewing for months. What began as a civil discussion quickly turned into a heated exchange. William, ever the pragmatic heir to the throne, did not mince his words. He accused Camilla of misjudging the public, of failing to understand the delicate balance of the monarchy's image. "You can't force the people to accept what they don't believe," William argued sharply, his voice rising. Charles, who had always stood by Camilla, struggled to defend his wife. But the cracks in the royal facade were now impossible to ignore. The future of the monarchy hung in the balance, and William made it clear: Camilla's reign had become a liability. It wasn't just about the portrait, it was about leadership, legacy, and the survival of the monarchy itself. As the fallout from the portrait continued to unfold, William's body language became the subject of intense scrutiny. The media dissected his every move during the ceremony, analyzing the subtle shifts in his stance, the deliberate avoidance of eye contact with Camilla. To many, it was an unmistakable signal. William, the future king, was no longer willing to wear the mask of royal unity. His distance from Camilla spoke volumes that there were deep issues within the family that could no longer be hidden behind the polished veneer of royal decorum. The monarchy, once seen as a bastion of strength and unity, now seemed fractured beyond repair. Inside the palace, the whispers only grew louder. Royal aides, once loyal to Camilla, began to question whether the monarchy could withstand the growing divisions. The question that lingered in the corridors was simple yet profound. Could William be preparing to challenge Camilla for the throne? Could the heir to the throne, in his silence, be signaling his readiness to take his place, not just as king, but as the leader of a monarchy that could no longer afford the infighting and dysfunction? The stakes had never been higher. As the media began to pick up on the widening divide, the situation escalated into what many were now calling a royal crisis. News outlets across the world framed the events as the breaking point for Camilla's reign. The narrative was clear. The monarchy, once united, was now on the brink of collapse. For the first time in decades, the public began to question the future of the royal family, and all eyes were on Prince William. His quiet protest had ignited a firestorm, and the monarchy's future seemed uncertain. As tensions rise, an unexpected ally emerges from the shadows, ready to challenge everything Camilla has fought for. Desperation set in as Camilla sat alone in the quiet of her private quarters, staring at the envelope that had just been delivered to her. The handwriting was familiar, yet she hadn't seen it in years. A former confidant, someone she thought had disappeared from her life, had somehow found their way back into the heart of her crisis. The letter, which seemed so innocuous at first, carried with it the weight of her entire world. It was a plea, a last attempt to save her. But it was more than that. It was a revelation, a truth she was not prepared to hear. As Camilla unfolded the letter, her eyes scanned the words, each sentence cutting deeper than the last. The person writing it had once been a trusted ally, someone who had shared in the private moments of her life and rise to power. But now, they are revealing a shocking truth. The downfall of her reign hadn't been a series of unfortunate accidents. It had been meticulously orchestrated by those she had called family. Names were named, alliances were revealed, and betrayals that had been carefully hidden for years were now laid bare before her eyes. The letter exposed the quiet scheming, the whispered conversations, and the backstabbing that had been taking place right under her nose. People she had trusted, people she had considered allies, had turned on her when she needed them most. The revelations left her shaken to the core. The carefully constructed world she had built was crumbling, and the foundation beneath her was showing signs of collapse. She had spent years navigating the treacherous waters of royal life, always thinking she could count on her closest supporters. But now, in a single letter, everything has changed. The betrayal was worse than she had ever imagined, and it forced her to confront the darkest fears she had kept locked away. Who could she trust now? Was anyone truly loyal? Or had they all been playing their own game, waiting for the moment when they could tear her down? The decision Camilla now faced was more than just personal. It was political, and the fate of the monarchy itself seemed to hang in the balance. Should she confront the people named in the letter? Should she expose the secrets, risking the further alienation of her family and the public? Or should she quietly retreat into the shadows, conceding power to those who had orchestrated her fall from grace? With the monarchy in turmoil, the decision she made in these next few hours could either secure her place on the throne or set the stage for her final downfall. As she sat in the silence of her chambers, reading and rereading the letter, Camilla's emotional breakdown became impossible to ignore. The woman who had once stood strong in the face of everything now seemed fragile, vulnerable in a way the public had never seen. Her world, once filled with the grandeur of royal life, now felt empty and hollow. She wondered, not for the first time, if she had any allies left. The weight of her past decisions, the alliances she had forged, and the betrayals she had endured, all of it had led to this moment. She felt the walls closing in, and the crushing weight of uncertainty left her gasping for air. The letter was just the beginning. Camilla's response, the decision she made in the coming days, would set off a chain of events that could alter the course of royal history forever. Would she rise from the ashes, stronger than ever before? Or would she fade into the background, a queen abandoned by all who once stood by her side? The future of the monarchy her family, and her legacy rested in her hands. The moment of truth had arrived. Camilla, feeling the weight of her fractured reign, had summoned the royal family to a private meeting, one that would either heal the wounds or deepen the rift that had already begun to tear the monarchy apart. Charles, William, and Anne were the key players, and this was the confrontation she had been dreading. She knew the stakes. This wasn't just about the portrait or her public image anymore. This was about survival. If she couldn't reclaim her position here, her reign would be over. It was now or never. As the family gathered in the royal chambers, a palpable tension filled the room. Camilla stood before them, poised but fragile. The walls seemed to close in as she addressed the family, her voice trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of the betrayal she was about to expose. She had trusted them. These were the people who had stood by her, or so she thought. But now, secrets that had been buried for years began to surface. The family's unity, once unshakable, was now exposed as a fragile illusion. Each word that came from Camilla's mouth peeled back layers of hidden resentment, and each response from her family only added fuel to the fire. The years of simmering tension had finally boiled over. Charles, still a champion of her role as queen, tried to defend her, but the cracks in his support were evident. His words, though kind, lacked the conviction they once had. His loyalty was wavering, as if he, too, was beginning to question whether she could truly lead the family through the challenges ahead. William, however, stood firm in his stance. His silence spoke volumes, and when he finally spoke, his words were cutting. "The monarchy is bigger than any one of us," he said, his voice cold. "It's about the future, and your inability to unite us is becoming a liability." Camilla fought back tears, her emotional plea falling on deaf ears. She had given everything for this family, for the monarchy, yet, as William's words hung in the air, she felt the sting of a betrayal she had never imagined possible from her own son-in-law. It wasn't just the coldness of his tone, it was the clear message. He no longer viewed her as an ally. She was a threat, an obstacle to the future he envisioned. And with every word he spoke, it became more evident that his vision of the monarchy no longer included her. But it was Anne's quiet remarks that truly struck at the heart of the matter. "You've always wanted to be queen," Anne said softly, but her words cut through the air with the sharpness of a dagger. "But what do you stand for? Who do you represent? What is your legacy, Camilla?" The silence that followed felt suffocating, and Camilla, for the first time, questioned whether she had ever truly earned her place in the royal family. Her role, her identity, now seemed uncertain. Was she just a symbol of Charles's reign? A pawn in a larger game? The confrontation escalated, the weight of their words threatening to collapse everything Camilla had worked for. She could see it in their eyes. The family was divided, and the cracks were too deep to repair. This wasn't just a battle for the throne, it was a battle for her legacy, for her very identity within the monarchy. Her reign was in jeopardy. The trust she had once believed in was gone. And as the tension reached a breaking point, Camilla realized the truth. This wasn't just about the family's approval, it was about her place in history. The royal family's future was now uncertain. The foundation that had once been so solid seemed to be crumbling beneath their feet. Who would emerge victorious, and at what cost? The monarchy, once a symbol of unity and strength, now stood on the precipice of division. And as the meeting drew to a close, the shadows of betrayal and broken promises lingered in the air. As the family fractured, a new figure emerged to challenge Camilla's throne, one she never expected. In the final moments of her reign, Queen Camilla revealed a secret so powerful that it could change everything. The world had been watching, waiting for a sign that she could regain control. But what Camilla unveiled sent shockwaves through the monarchy. A letter, long thought to be private, surfaced, a letter from the late Queen Elizabeth herself. It was not meant to be shared, not meant to see the light of day, but now, it was a bombshell that threatened to destroy everything. In it, Queen Elizabeth expressed doubts about Camilla's ability to hold the throne, questioning her suitability as queen. The weight of those words, coming from the very monarch whose legacy Camilla had worked so hard to uphold, hit with the force of a tidal wave. The letter exposed a truth that no one had anticipated. Queen Elizabeth, the symbol of stability and tradition, had quietly harbored concerns about the very foundation Camilla had tried to build. The revelation shook the royal family to its core. The public, hungry for scandal, reacted with the fury of a world still reeling from the instability that had already begun to plague the monarchy. The media frenzy that followed was like nothing seen before. Headlines screamed of betrayal, of a monarchy on the verge of collapse, and of a queen whose reign had been in doubt from the very beginning. The letter was out, and now everyone knew. The doubts that had once been whispered in hushed tones had found their voice. As the fallout unfolded, Camilla was forced to confront the overwhelming pressure now closing in on her. The world had seen her as the consort, the wife who had weathered so much for the monarchy's sake. But now, they saw her as the woman who had been judged unfit by the very queen she had admired. Her options were slim: remain in power, fighting to silence the whispers and press on despite the world's disillusionment, or abdicate, stepping down to save the monarchy from a future of fractured loyalty and public scorn. In either scenario, her legacy would be irreparably altered. But the question remained: what would she choose? Would she choose to fight, to defy her critics, or would she step aside for the future of the crown? As Camilla wrestled with her decision, the fate of the monarchy itself seemed to hang in the balance. The royal family's future was no longer in their hands. It was in the hands of the people. Would they accept her, despite the revelations, and allow her to continue as queen? Or would they demand change, pushing the monarchy into a new era, one without her at its helm? The public sentiment was unpredictable, and Camilla could feel the weight of it pressing on her every move. In those final moments, the twist was undeniable. A secret, so devastating, had been revealed. And now, Camilla stood on the precipice of her future. Was her downfall inevitable, or could she rise again, stronger than ever before? The audience, gripped by the dramatic turn of events, was left questioning everything. The fate of the monarchy, her reign, and the royal family's legacy would all be determined by what came next. As the world waits for her final decision, one question remains: what will Camilla do next? Share your thoughts in the comments section, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.